Test run.
Run 2. Hello, I'm Sean Gardner, and I'll be teaching you how earthquakes, one of the most destructive and devastating natural disasters, actually shape the physical world how we know it. I've learned that earthquakes are pretty cool, and I've learned a lot about them in my physical geography class at Nicolet College this semester that I happen to be passing. I've learned enough to teach you how earthquakes happen, their underlying mechanisms, and how they've shaped the physical world. Earthquakes are sudden vibrations in the Earth's crust caused by tectonic plate movement. Tectonic plates are slabs of the Earth's crust, and where they meet is known as boundaries. There are two types of tectonic plate crust, oceanic and continental. Oceanic crust is denser because it's made of iron and magnesium, and continental crust is lighter because it's made of silica. This is extremely relevant in how they interact. Speaking of plate boundaries and interactions, according to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, 95% of the yearly 20,000 earthquakes occur along these plate boundaries. So now that you know what earthquakes are, plate boundaries are, and how they're relevant, let's get into plate interactions. There are two types of plate boundaries, convergent and divergent. Let's start with convergent. Convergent boundaries are exactly what they sound like. It's when two plates come together and push up against each other. There are three further subcategories. Let's start with continental to continental convergent boundary. This happens when two continental crusted plates push up against each other and neither gives way, leading them to fold upwards and expand vertically, creating a very tall mountain range. They're characterized by those tall mountain ranges as well as deep earthquakes 30 to 50 miles below the surface and having no volcanic activity. The best example of a continental to continental convergent boundary would be the Himalayan mountains, which were formed when the Indian plate and the Eurasian plate converged, folding upwards and expanding into the tallest mountain range in the world. Moving on, there's oceanic to continental plate boundaries. What happens when an oceanic plate and a continental plate converge is that the oceanic plate subducts it, going underneath, and this lifts the continental plate, creating coastal elevation. They're characterized by that coastal elevation as well as frequent earthquakes and very frequent and destructive volcanic activity. The volcanic activity comes from the oceanic plate going down into the Earth's mantle and bringing water with it, lowering the melting point and causing the mantle to melt, rise, and erupt underneath the continental plate. The most familiar example of this would be the Cascade Mountain Range, stretching from California to Alaska, that has volcanic mountains such as Mount Rainier. Another example would be the Andes Mountains in South America. And the last continental subtype is oceanic to oceanic. What happens when two oceanic plates converge is that because both of them are so dense, they fold downwards, creating a deep ocean trench. When this happens, magma comes out from the trench, rises up, cools, and becomes a floating volcanic mountain, a floating volcanic island range. The most known example would be the Mariana Trench, which also, less known, has the Mariana Archipelago, a string of volcanic islands right above it. So now that you know the three subtypes of convergent boundaries, continental to continental, oceanic to continental, and oceanic to oceanic, let's learn about divergent boundaries. Divergent boundaries are also pretty self-explanatory. It's when the land or the seafloor splits apart. There are only two subtypes of divergent boundaries. First, there's oceanic to oceanic divergent boundaries, which are characterized by ocean ridges that are created by the frequent volcanic activity. When the plates diverge, magma arises out of it and cools, creating new seafloor, which, compared to the deep ocean around it, gives it higher elevation, making essentially an underwater mountain. Lastly, we have divergent continental to continental. These happen inland, where the Earth's crust stresses, cracks, and sometimes eventually splits, creating a rift valley. Rift valleys are just that. They're isolated valleys inland from the stressed Earth. But what you might not know is that these are the foundation of the Pangea and continental drift theories. It is theorized that these can cause continents to completely split apart and form oceans in the middle. That's what experts think created the Red Sea in between Africa, the Middle East, and Europe. To recap, earthquakes are seismic waves caused by tectonic plates. There are 3 subtypes of convergent boundaries and only 2 subtypes of divergent boundaries. You can take a second and look at the recap slide. But in conclusion, earthquakes are destructive, but also capable of great creation. From extremely tall mountain ranges to floating volcanic islands with deep ocean trenches underneath, all the way to underwater mountain ranges and splitting continents, earthquakes and their underlying mechanisms are the foundation of the physical world as we know it. Thank you for listening, and I hope you really enjoyed and found that earthquakes are interesting.
Nice job.